Hello and welcome to Sunday Sports Rewind. I'm your host, Chris Barrier. 104 years ago today, the great Vince Lombardi was born. Over a decade later, the house that Vince built is still alive and well, preparing for another year of Packers football. And so too are we here at NBC 26, which means it's time for another edition of Cheese and Packers. We're back for another edition of Cheese and Packers. Chris Barrier, Kelly Price, and we're happy to have our guest again, Michael Cullen from the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel, Packers beat writer. Michael, thanks for coming back, even though we kind of had to choke on cheese last week. We appreciate you returning. So this week we've got a staple, okay? We've got the classic Wisconsin cheese curd. I'm told that if you hear it squeak in your mouth, that's a good thing. And speaking of classic, speaking of the staple of Wisconsin, a guy we didn't touch on last week, Rodgers. The talk of his future salary cap, we had a kind of an interesting quote. Take a listen to what Rodgers said.
I know my value in this league, and I know that the team appreciates me. I'm going to try and continue to make myself, an indispensable part of this roster. When you do that, when your time comes up to get a contract, you usually get a contract.
It is squeaky. Do you hear it squeak?
Definitely squeaking.
I like it. Do you like it?
Wow.
And I'm not choking, so we're good.
None for you.
This is also our first cheese curds experience
First ever.
as non-Wisconsinites.
So
See? It's going to get you too. I'm not the only one. We should not be eating while we're doing this.
Pick it up from there. Michael, what do you take from that? What do you think about Rodgers talking about his future there?
So it's not like anything was imminent with Rodgers' contract. It runs through the 2019 season. But I think what he was saying is that, look, we have $20 million in salary cap space. In terms of per year average, I'm the 5th highest paid quarterback in the league. And when my next deal comes around, I'm going to want more than that. There's no doubt that he takes pride in the fact that he is the highest passer rating in the history of the league, and he wants to be compensated on that level.
Also, the offensive line, the guys in front of Rodgers, is kind of an interesting dynamic going into this season. They released Jacob Flores this week. They signed Robert Laff. The 6th-round pick was Kofi Amici. How do you see those pieces coming together on the offensive line?
Yeah, so one of the guys that Rodgers might have wanted to sign with that salary cap space was TJ Lang, and with him gone, there was a hole at right guard. And so they brought in Jari Evans. That was the big free agent signing. And Kofi Amici is sort of a guy that can play multiple positions along the line, but it seems like it's going to be Evans.
The slow decay of the inside linebacker, you had an interesting article about that earlier this week. The Packers are part of this kind of the way the league is trending. And what do you see from that side of the ball as far as how the Packers are using the inside linebackers?
Yeah, so as teams around the league throw more and more and more, the defenses have to get smaller in response to that, because you can't have your traditional 250-pound linebackers chasing around running backs, receivers, and tight ends. It just doesn't work. So they've started using Morgan Burnett, Josh Jones, these guys that are traditional safety body types, more as inside linebackers. So there's still a role for guys like Blake Martinez and Jake Ryan. They're going to be used to stop the run. But in terms of, the idea of a linebacker playing 1st, 2nd, and 3rd down, which used to be the hallmark of that position, it's not as prevalent as it was anymore.
So it's a limited rule. Does that mean that in the future, are we going to see less of these guys coming out of the college level? Is that a trickle-down effect?
I don't know if it's less of the guys coming out of the college level, but I think you're going to see guys that specialize a little bit more. You look at Joe Thomas, who is the smallest of the 3 inside linebackers that were on the roster last year, and he played the most snaps of any of those guys. And the reason is because he was just big enough to contribute somewhat in the run and just fast enough to chase guys that, have more speed and play more agile positions. So that's kind of what you're talking about, is a guy that doesn't fit the mold but ends up playing the most snaps.
So we've got minicamp coming up this week. As of last week, Mike McCarthy hadn't decided if veterans would be mandatory for this. So what is the goal with minicamp, and what are you looking to see from people this week?
Yeah, so last year veterans were excused, and it was basically, I think, if you had 4 or more years of experience, you didn't have to be here. So it's really sort of a last chance for the coaches to work with these young guys before they go away for 5 weeks. And it's going to be huge for Kevin King, the 2nd-round pick, but the first pick that the Packers made. He's been finishing up his last semester at Washington on the quarter system for the last month. So this minicamp is going to be his first real hands-on involvement with the rest of the team, so to speak. So it's a huge chance for him to get one little last bit of knowledge before 5 weeks off and then training camp.
King's got a lot of catching up to do with the Packers. We got a lot of catching up to do with this cheese platter. Michael, thanks again for stopping in, and please help yourself to some cheese.